pour la remise du prix de l'étudiant.
For the Student Award 2022, I'm delighted to have with me Emmanuel de Oliveira. Good morning, sir. I think everyone knows you. You are the president of SNSM. Maybe a word about this great institution. Thank you so much for having me. SNSM, the Lifeboat Association, is an association of 9,000 volunteers whose main mission is to rescue people from the beach off to the high sea. 9,000 people, 9,000 volunteers who not only rescue people, 32,000 people were rescued last year, but they also provide support for property and ships. And now we're coming closer to the issue at hand. 9,500 ships helped, rescued or tugged last year. That's so many claims, so many disputes or issues or discussions. Yet SNSM is also a wonderful coverage of the territory with 200 stations in mainland France. The overseas territories are also covered, and we have a very strong local presence with all maritime players, whether fishermen, yachters, port operators, and also insurers. So we ensure very close ties and local coverage with maritime players. Thank you so much for this award. I have the great pleasure to welcome the winner of the Student Award 2022, Max Pabille. Max is coming from Aveyron. He's 24 years old, and for his M2 in International Transport at University Paris 1 Pantheon-Sorbonne, he wrote a dissertation on transport fees faced with coronavirus, dispute prevention, and changes in contract and business practices. You're currently a student lawyer at the Paris Bar, and you want to focus on international disputes in maritime law. Now, with you, we have Benoît Larère. Please come on stage. You are head of customer experience at DB Schenker France, and you were Max's tutor in a company during his sandwich course. So you followed his dissertation very closely, but first we would ask Max to tell us more about his work. So first, why this topic? I saw the topic. Well, it's quite technical, isn't it? How did you choose this subject? Well, first of all, I would like to thank Parimat, Sésame, and Mr. de Oliveira for this award today. As you said, I wrote this dissertation during my 2 years of sandwich course at DB Schenker. That's how I thought of this subject, because I was faced with the health crisis in my business as a transport forwarder. And when I worked at DB Schenker, I saw that there was very little written on the responsibilities of a consignee when his business is faced with such a crisis. And the goal of my dissertation was to find solutions in order to solve the risk of dispute that the consignee was faced with in this context. I know that it's very difficult, this type of exercise. This dissertation that you wrote is quite hefty, but how could you summarize it, the challenge of my thesis, in 3 minutes? Well, my dissertation is mostly an analysis of the standard contract from the decree of 15 April 2013. This standard contract is fundamental for the contractual relationships between the consignee and the client for lack of a convention. And my memoir is here to propose changes in the standard contract, transform the obligation to inform the clients in an obligation on means, so they are only liable in case of negligence. Also restrict the definition of force majeure in case of transport commissions, because the legal definition of force majeure is much too imprecise and subject to a lot of different interpretations by judges, and also maybe use the suspensive effect of on the execution of contracts due to force majeure, because people very often think it exempts them from any liability. Then the question is also about scoping the reliability of consignees in case of delays, and shipping companies are systematically exempt from liability in case of delays, and consignees were faced with very big problems. There were delays on all types of transport. You should also provide for limitations, or at least restrict the liability of the consignee in case of repair of other harm than losses and damages. Some loss and damage could be observed in ports and transports, but the losses by the loaders were mostly operational losses, and nothing is provided for in the standard contract. And also put more obligations on loaders, especially when it comes to the delivery and receipt of goods, because many loaders closed their factories, and sometimes consignees were not even informed of the fact that they were not able to take off the goods or receive them as expected. Looking at the operational and commercial angle, what would you recommend? Well, my advice is maybe very wide, and it's probably my work-study program at DB Schenker that got me to look at it. First, inviting consignees to diversify their freight forwarders to diversify their clients. When some sectors are impacted, others are in full swing, like the pharma sector. Essential goods were no longer transported because of the closure of shops, but maybe also diversify their clients in terms of nature between public and private. With Arnaud Larère, we were working on public transport procurement, whereas private customers are much more subject to climate risks and economic risks. Public sector clients have much more steady flows, and also inviting forwarders to digitize the exchange of information with their clients. It takes too much time very often. It may be more complex in situations like the crisis that we had. And we also saw that it connects very well with the previous panel discussion. Is very clear. Benoît Larère, maybe one response. You saw Max at work. You read his dissertation. How do you look at it? First, I was very proud to support such a dedicated student as Max, and so I invite all of you to promote work-study programs in your companies, because our experience is only valuable if we can pass it on. And if you have such a dedicated and brilliant student as Max, it's a real pleasure. Regarding his dissertation, we saw that earlier. In fact, as forwarders, we are really at the forefront of a contemporary world in which, unfortunately, nothing is more predictable than uncertainty. How could provisions such as force majeure, with a fairly restrictive application, how is that really suitable to defend our interests that very often diverge from that of our subcontractors and clients? In this context of a constant crisis, our legal and insurance department is really at the forefront, and more than ever, it is here to support our team to really act as a tool for sales, for decision-making, and support for our customers. Now, our duty to advise and the obligations of our co-workers who are in direct contact with our clients takes up most of their work, so that in the best conditions possible, we can transport their goods. Mr. Millier was saying that earlier, from A to B, according to an agreed price, agreed times, whilst respecting their integrity. That being said, in the current world, it's sometimes a bit difficult for us. As Max recalled, it's important for us to think about improving production and information on content so that our customers are kept abreast of the latest developments in geopolitical or maritime sectors. So with that, Max's dissertation in a crisis period helped us take a step back from these matters, and at DB Schenker we started a wider thinking process about these issues and their implications. So thank you, and once again congratulations, Max, for this great work. Emmanuel de Oliveira, you read the dissertation as well from cover to cover. I can testify to that. What's your response, and what does that lead you to think? Well, first of all, when I read the dissertation, the thought that came to mind immediately is that the dissertation raises more questions than it provides answers. That's a great quality, because suddenly it leads you to think. And so I really enjoyed that. What really caused me some grief was the issue of force majeure. Well, force majeure, I like the definition that you came up with on 3 adjectives: extraneous, compelling, and unpredictable. And then the courts will decide on these characters. But these 3 adjectives really summarize it all. Extraneous, yes, of course, the factors that trigger force majeure should be fully extraneous to the transport business of the player. Compelling, you cannot resist. Well, thinking about the pandemic, it's obvious, it's absolutely compelling. And unpredictable, there are 2 in January 2020. Who could say that we would have a pandemic? So really, your conclusion that I really liked is that force majeure, as part of this pandemic, changed over time, over the phases of the pandemic, and depending on the countries. So probably North Korea didn't have the same view of the pandemic as we had. So these are so many thoughts, and also I really like the fact that you connected with common law, because our maritime law is mostly based on common law, with frustration and hardship, which are parallels to our force majeure clauses. Thank you very much. Please ask Max if you want to know more and read the report.